The candidates were surprised by the sudden change in gravity. It felt like it was going to crush them to death. Lengmo realized that the gravity was a problem. He had no choice but to go all out with his aura. He instructed Bing Yu to do the same, and the two of them finally managed to stand up. Lengmo asked Sedila if he was all right. He told him he was fine, but it was just a little taxing on his body. Lengmo reminded them that there was a limit to how long they could keep their auras activated, so they had to reach the finish line as fast as possible. He asked both of them to grab his shoulders. They did as they were told, not sure what he was going to do next. He told them they had to hang on tight since he was going to fly with them. Suddenly, the ground beneath him began to crumble as he charged towards the destination. Bing Yu and Sedila were shocked, along with everyone else watching them. One of the candidates figured he had no choice but to use his trump card, which he had been saving for later. He called out a red-eyed ape, revealing himself to be a beast tamer. He mounted it and it began running in the direction of the examiner. One of the other candidates pointed out that the beast tamers were supposed to be really rare. A few others were impressed with his resolve and got motivated to finish the race themselves. One of them activated an earth element ability and used the ground to enhance his speed. Another one activated an ability called Wind Shadow, followed by an ice path user. Even ones without magic were determined to reach the finish line at the cost of their own life. The examiner had noticed them getting used to the gravity. This actually was all part of his plan. They had yet to see the true horror of the second test. 10 minutes later, the beast tamer had reached a narrow, curved path. The temperature had become really hot, and his ape was unable to move. He was also nearing his own limit from continuously resisting the gravity and wanted to get over with the test. He realized he was not going to be able to catch up with the three ahead of him and was on the brink of giving up. Suddenly, he spotted a spring nearby. There were also some fruits lying around which got the ape drooling. This was the perfect opportunity for him. He would finally be able to rest and drink some water. Unbeknownst to them, the pair was actually staring into the lava. Lengmo's group spotted them, and Lengmo wondered what had happened to the beast tamer. Sedila said he didn't know, but it seemed to him that the scream from earlier might have been from him. Phoenix informed Lengmo that it was illusion magic. He explained that he could feel the presence of a very strong illusion spell that had probably been cast for the test. Although the effect wasn't very apparent, its range seemed to be extremely wide. It was easier for weaker-minded individuals to be affected by the spell. The beast tamer had most likely fallen into the trap, according to him. There was no more sign of breathing from him, so he had probably already died. Lengmo was taken aback by this. Sedila asked him what was going on. He told him what Phoenix had said about a wide area spell having been cast here, and how anyone with a weak will would fall into the trap and die. Sedila was shocked, and realized that this must have meant that the scream from earlier was because someone had fallen into the trap. He told them they had to be careful since there might be more traps along the way. Just then, he noticed a shed in the distance and asked Lengmo if they could go rest there. Lengmo looked where he was pointing, and only saw a cliff. He slapped Sedila back into reality and told him that he was being controlled by the illusion. Back in the Arbitrator Association in Skyway City, an urgent meeting was being held. Someone announced that the situation was very critical right now. An old man asked him if what he had said was true. His subordinate confirmed it, saying that it was most likely a great Swordmaster-level monster according to the results of the magic detection. Right now it was directly below Skyway City, and its recent movements had started to become more and more frequent. If this were to continue, then he was afraid that the foundation of the city might collapse. The old man told him that he hoped the people would be dispersed by the time they sent their men to kill it. His subordinate added that he had heard that the arbitrator exam was being held there right now. Meanwhile, Lengmo was slowly falling behind, and the other candidates had almost caught up to him. He admitted that running in the high gravity was no joke. This was testing both their willpower and endurance. Just then, Phoenix informed him that a powerful demonic beast was heading towards them. Lengmo was surprised he had not sensed its presence. Phoenix explained that it was probably coming from the underground and that he had just detected it. He was not sure what kind of monster it was, but he could tell its level was that of a swordmaster. Sedila asked Lengmo what was going on. He informed him about what Phoenix had said regarding a powerful monster coming from the underground. Bing Yu was startled upon hearing this. Phoenix warned that it had suddenly sped up. This was most likely because it had detected them. Before they could react, the ground below them started to shake. Phoenix yelled at them to run. The floor had started to crack, and he insisted that it would be too late if they didn't run now. The other candidates were confused as to what was happening. They wondered if it was an earthquake or maybe even a part of the exam. Suddenly, one of them noticed the lava rising and urged everyone to hurry. Lengmo advised them to run right now, or else they might end up getting in a lot of trouble. The ground continued to crack open, and finally, something popped out of it. The other candidates were terrified since it had just come out of the lava. The monster let out a loud roar and charged straight at them. The candidates had no choice but to run since they couldn't fight it under the extreme gravity. Just then, the monster fired a gigantic ball of fire at Leng Mo and his friends. Leng Mo realized there was no way to dodge it. Right at that moment, a voice called out to him, telling him there was no need to panic. The firebolt struck them with a deafening boom, but once the smoke cleared, they turned out to be completely unharmed. Sedila was impressed with what Leng Mo had just done. Leng Mo sensed that this was the power of his phoenix. The monster began charging up its next attack. Leng Mo yelled at the two to run, reasoning that it was a fire-type monster, and that he and Phoenix could most likely block it. Without skipping a beat, the monster lunged at him, devouring him whole. Bing Yu and Sedila cried out to him. Sedila started to panic, asking Bing Yu what they should do now. Bing Yu replied that they had to kill it. A look of anger had swept across his face, and he told the monster he was going to slice it into pieces. He activated his aura, ready to go all out. The monster fired another beam at him. He stood his ground, ready to take it head-on. The two forces clashed, sending shockwaves throughout the area. Sedila could only stand and watch. This was the first time Bing Yu was witnessing the power of a great Swordmaster-level monster. Suddenly, he shouted at Sedila to run, saying that he could not hold it any longer. Sedila told him he was not leaving. He felt like there was no way Bing Yu would survive if he didn't start running right now. Bing Yu told him to forget it since it was already too late. He had given up on surviving and thought he was going to meet Leng Mo on the other side. Right at that moment, the fireball scattered. Bing Yu was confused as to what had just happened. The monster was screeching in pain. Sedila praised him, thinking that he had just beaten it. Inside the monster's stomach, Leng Mo was still alive. He saw himself surrounded by lava and wondered why it wasn't hurting him. He was contemplating if he was even still alive. Phoenix interrupted him, saying that it obviously wouldn't hurt him because he was protecting him. Thanks to that, the monster was not able to digest him. Leng Mo was glad to hear that and felt like he was lucky that it had been a fire-type monster. Otherwise, he would have been dead by now. Phoenix yelled at him to quit talking and find a way to get them out of there. He told him it wouldn't be able to digest him, but they would get excreted out of its backside. Leng Mo finally turned serious, as he was not thrilled with the idea of being turned into feces. He noticed they were near the monster's esophagus. He figured they could make a hole through there and began to attack it. He fired a barrage of punches at its weak spot, making it squirm in pain. Bing Yu suspected that Leng Mo was still alive and might be trying to find his way out. Leng Mo could tell it was convulsing, which meant that his attacks were working. This was not enough, though. He had used his full power, but the monster seemed to have a really thick skin. Phoenix pointed out that this was obviously a great Swordmaster-level monster and that he had to keep attacking. The monster's movements had started to become violent. Sedila asked Bing Yu if they should retreat for now and look for help to kill it since it seemed to be going crazy. The ground around them was cracking up, and they had to do something quickly. Bing Yu refused to move, saying that Leng Mo was still in its stomach and he was going to get him out of there. He jumped at the monster and Sedila called out to him, asking him to be careful. Bing Yu landed a blow on it, intending to damage its skin, but to no avail. All of a sudden, the monster dove back into the lava. Bing Yu was frustrated and yelled at it to come back. Its movements had made Leng Mo lose his balance. He was not even able to stand up at all and had started to feel dizzy. Phoenix ordered him to keep attacking at all costs. If it were to heal, then all of his efforts would amount to nothing. Phoenix told him that he couldn't hold on any longer, so he had to stay strong. Leng Mo had had enough. He decided he was going to mess up its body from the inside. It was time for him to use his strongest skill. His face had turned serious, and he switched his stance. He swung his sword multiple times at the monster's skin. The monster screeched in pain and began squirming around. It seemed like he had finally inflicted some serious damage on it. The monster, however, had still not calmed down. He was amazed that it still had so much strength left. Suddenly, the monster came to a halt, knocking him forward. He regained his composure and noticed that it had stopped moving. His attack seemed to have finally worked. He was excited to have defeated a great Swordmaster-level monster. Phoenix warned him to stay on his guard until they got out of there. The two of them found their way out into its mouth. Leng Mo wondered where they might have ended up since the lava was gone. He lifted its teeth, relieved to be able to get out, and spotted a short white man in front of him. It was a dwarf. He had also noticed Leng Mo and started panicking, worried that a human had spotted him. Leng Mo was startled to see a dwarf. He wondered if there was a dwarven village nearby. The dwarf, on the other hand, was too shocked by what he had just seen and began running away, worried that the humans had found them. Leng Mo called out to him, shouting that he was not a bad guy. Phoenix told him to forget it, since there was no point in explaining, and asked him to leave it to him. The monster was still growling softly. Phoenix had no idea where they were. It still seemed to be somewhere in the underground to Lengmo, but he didn't know how they were supposed to get out of there. He figured they would need to swim through the lava to get back and stated that he would ask the dwarf later. Just then, the dwarf returned with a few of his comrades and pointed towards him, ordering them to tie him up and ask him how he had got here. Lengmo raised his hands in surrender and tried to convince them that he was not a bad guy. In fact, he told them he was also a dwarf. The soldiers didn't believe a word, asking him if he thought they were dumb or if he was making fun of their intelligence. His height was noticeably taller than any of them, which made it impossible for them to believe him. Lengmo realized it would take forever to clearly explain things to them. Right at that moment, Phoenix interrupted, asking them to back off. He announced that he was the mighty dwarf guardian, Phoenix. The dwarves were startled for a second, before accusing him of pretending to be the real Phoenix. Someone suggested that they should cook them up for insulting their guardian. Phoenix was pissed. Even Lengmo was laughing at him now. He yelled at him to quit laughing, but Lengmo just couldn't control it. One of the dwarves demanded they act serious and stop fighting back. Phoenix turned towards them and announced that he would have to show his true power since they actually thought that he was a little chicken. He repeated the same words once more, saying that he was the mighty dwarf guardian and ordered them to lower themselves. Suddenly, flames erupted around him in the shape of a large phoenix. The dwarves realized that this was actually the real deal. He informed them that Lengmo was his agent, and they should consider him his messenger. The dwarves were shocked at this revelation and asked him to forgive them. Phoenix told them they should have done this in the first place. Lengmo had no problem with it, since the misunderstanding had now been cleared up. He asked them to bring him to their chief. The group traveled through the caves to their hideout. Word had spread about the great Phoenix's arrival. It was the first time the dwarves over there were seeing a phoenix. Lengmo took off his shirt and showed them the mark of the phoenix to prove that he was also a dwarf. He explained that he was a human, but he had been raised by dwarves all his life. An old woman asked him for forgiveness regarding the earlier offense. She explained that she was the chief of the dwarven village and asked him to not mind their earlier behavior. Lengmo admitted it was not their fault since he had been born a human, so it was right for them to be cautious. The chief expressed her gratitude and told him she had a small request. She was afraid they would no longer be able to stay there and wished for him to take them with him. Lengmo asked her where he was supposed to take them. She explained that if he was raised by a dwarf village, then he could maybe take them there. Lengmo told her he personally had no problem with that, but he would just need permission from his village chief. He also wanted to know what had happened here that had made them move. He had figured that he still needed to be cautious since they were not from the same tribe. He didn't want to end up causing a future conflict by bringing them there without knowing anything about them. The chief explained that they had been living here for decades. Even though the environment was terrible, it was very safe for them since they had never had anyone interrupt their lives. But recently, all of that had changed. Monsters' heads started storming them out of nowhere, and they had been fighting them in order to keep their village safe. She told him that they were losing too many brave souls in the fight, and that their tribe's strongest warriors were all dead. Another great swordmaster-ranked monster had recently appeared again, and they had been unable to do anything about it. All they could do was drive it out with traps for some time. She was thankful he had defeated it, and pointed out that they would soon be wiped out if they kept experiencing these kinds of attacks. They were not afraid of dying, but their tribe's pride, the dwarf holy book, wouldn't be passed on. The name rang a bell in Lengmo's mind. She continued, saying that they held the Book of Iron, but they didn't know where the Book of Stone was located. After the collapse of the dwarf race, they had lost contact with the other tribes. Lengmo's Book of Fire was apparently the strongest out of them all. Lengmo regretfully told her that the book had been taken by the humans. The chief was shocked and asked him who had taken it. He told her it was the fourth prince of the Fragrant Wind Empire. This was the reason he had left his village in order to kill him and avenge his people. The chief was not pleased with the situation. Lengmo asked her what was wrong. She told him it stemmed from the time of the ancient war thousands of years ago. The dwarf race used to be the largest in number, but one day, the evil lord had appeared and slaughtered all living things in this world. Even the guardians summoned by the three tribes had not been able to defeat the lord. In the end, the guardian had decided to seal the lord using its body. It was able to successfully do this with the help of the three tribes. The seal had then been split into 5 parts, and those 5 parts had been given to 5 kings. The dwarves had received 3 of them, which were now the holy books. One of the other 2 remaining parts, the Book of Wisdom, was held by a human kingdom, while the Book of Blood was held by the king of orcs. Lang Mo realized the meaning behind all of this. It could be that the fourth prince just wanted the knowledge within their book, but if he was looking to collect all 5 books, then this would mean he was trying to summon the evil lord. Meanwhile, in a distant land, an orc had been stabbed by a large sword. He praised his ruler, asking for forgiveness for not being able to do anything.